Welcome back to episode 17 of Steeler Thoughts and Chief Feelings. I am your co-host, Chris Dorst, and I am the Steelers fan and philosophy professor in the group.
And I'm Ajay Nair. I am the Chiefs fan and the psychiatrist in the group. Thanks to everyone who's been following along, either here on YouTube, on whatever podcasting app you're using, or on social media. We're on TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram at STCF715. Thanks to all of you that watch and comment, even those of you that comment making fun of different things that we do. We had some comments about like how close the microphone is positioned to my face and the fact that I say we when talking about the Chiefs a lot. More comments, the merrier.
We discussed this too.
Yeah. We have discussed that. Yeah, it's true.
It's good if you can anticipate the criticisms at least. It makes it look like you're not as hurt by them, right? Even though it really cuts deep.
Well, continue cutting us deep, and we will continue reading them. All right. So I guess I don't really have anything to follow up on from prior episodes. I don't know if you had anything.
Not really. I mean, I did see a few short. This is the off season, so it's nothing super impressive. But I saw a few articles about how Pat Frymuth could be that guy for the Steelers this year, and it got me a little worried about my cake smashing punishment bet, whatever. But I would take it. I would smash my face into a cake if Pat Frymuth is an All-Pro tight end this year. I think every Steelers fan would do that. We would all smash multiple cakes with our face. So we'll see, but. I do think he could be if in a different offense in a different system. I think of course, as we talked about last week, a lot of one's career and legacy is a function of factors outside of oneself, and so he's shown at least glimpses of really being very promising, and then many non-glimpses or glimpses of the opposite, I guess. Non-glimpses.
So that'll be interesting to see. I guess, on our predictions podcast, we can't really do Freiermuth predictions. We've kind of covered that. So you'll have to have other Steelers predictions ready.
Yeah, I guess that's right. I think I can have predictions about non-Freiermuth related things. Although it's one of those offseasons. I mean, we'll probably talk about this more, but it's one of those offseasons where it's really hard to predict. This is like what's going to happen with the team this year. It's just there's been so much change. But that's exciting too. Should we do the Chiefs? Should we get into
I think we're Chiefs first this time.
Okay. So I was thinking about the division preview aspect of this, and maybe I'll save like the rest of this question for when we have a more focused episode on the division previews. But I did want to ask, which team are you? I mean, it seems like there's a fairly straightforward answer to this, but maybe I'll be surprised. Which team are you most concerned about in the AFC West this year?
Oh, I definitely say the Chargers.
That's what I expected. Yeah.
Yeah, and not that I really think they're going to be good, like really good this year, but because they've just had a lot of roster turnover for salary cap reasons. But I do think that Jim Harbaugh has shown a pretty good track record of turning things around fast. So I think the first couple years he's there are going to be good, and I'm less worried about the years after that, but we'll see.
Is there an amount of their schemes could be different. They have new players, new coaches. Having a lot of unexpected factors when you play them is an advantage for them because you haven't changed as much as they've changed, right? So there's, it's in some sense it's easier for them to plan for you than vice versa.
Yeah, I think so, and particularly I think Andy Reid does a lot of in-division prep. I think my understanding, at least I've heard people say before, that a lot of his off-season and even training camp they do some prep work for interdivisional games. And I think they construct the roster a lot of times thinking about teams in their division. So I think that's notable that a divisional team is going to be very different. Now, I'm sure they're already scouting what Harbaugh did at Michigan. And I think that we should be ready for, that kind of more run heavy offense that is really focused on winning up front. I mean, not that we haven't seen offenses like this before, but I think that's what the new Chargers identity is going to be. It's going to be a lot of using advantages with the offensive line to try to move the ball.
That's interesting because you would have thought. I mean, it makes sense given Harbaugh's history, I guess, but you kind of would have thought that they would lean into Herbert as one of the superstar talented quarterbacks in the league right now. But do you expect maybe like a drop in Herbert's at least volume numbers or volume stats this year?
I think so. Although I do wonder if he will more consistently have spectacular plays, because I think he's going to get put in 3rd and long, and that seems to be the only time he really lets it go, But I do think they're going to have a lot of situations where kind of I would make it akin to when the Chiefs played the Bills in the divisional round of the playoffs last year. The Bills really worked on running the ball using Josh Allen and their James Cook. And they very successfully ran the ball, but because they were focused on running it so much, they had a lot of 3rd and medium, 3rd and longs that Josh Allen was able to convert, which is why they had such a good offensive game. And I think Herbert's going to be in a lot of those kinds of positions that they'll move the ball effectively, but that will result in him being asked to do a lot of special things on 3rd down. And I do think he's up to the task.
Well, that's a bit concerning. Yeah. So the interdivision prep work is also. I mean, I was going to ask what your take on that was, but I guess, the contrast would be, I guess, to just do more sort of look at league-wide trends and sort of make sure your team is well positioned to play against as many other teams as possible. Clearly, the division prep work focus, if that's what the focus has been, is working for the Chiefs. And I guess the more I talk about this, which is really one of the first times I've thought about this, it makes sense, I would think, to focus more on your division, given that you get 2 games each against the other teams, and league-wide trends might be less prominent within your own division, just because there are fewer teams and there's more chance for variance there. But yeah, that's. I mean, and I guess with the advantages when you have a quarterback like Mahomes, the worry for a strategy like this, where focusing so much on your division to construct your roster and your offense and defense, your schemes, I guess would be that you're, once you get to the playoffs, which you're probably well positioned to get to the playoffs, then you encounter other teams and you are not well matched up. You could argue the Steelers had this problem for a while whenever we would get to the playoffs and then lose to like the Patriots or something like that, because our corners just could not cover their receivers. But when you have a superstar like Mahomes, he can sort of, just turn on another gear in the playoffs and mask any deficiencies you might have in matchups against those other teams. So, the Chiefs have really got it made right now. I'm envious.
Well, and this may be oversimplifying things, but the way that I conceive that things are happening, and this I may be way off base, but I feel like what happens is Andy Reid looks at our division, and the staples of our offense are going to be what we're good at doing, what he thinks our skill set allows us to do, plus a little bit, I think, of what our division is not so good at defending. And I think what happens is we run our staples against everybody in the regular season, maybe adding some things that we need, that making tweaks through the year as we find things that we thought we'd be good at in training camp and we're not actually good at. See last year, for example. But then I think the wrinkles only really come out in full force in the playoffs. And some people theorize that the reason why we play so well against NFC teams in the regular season is that Andy Reid's willing to pull out more wrinkles against NFC teams because he's not worried about seeing them as often. But that would be interesting because everybody gets to see that tape, so I wonder what that means. But it does feel like we kind of run Staples a lot, especially in like the first half of the season, and then start making slight tweaks. But the real like unleashing of the offense comes in the playoffs, and it makes me wonder if our staples are a little more tailored toward our division, and we're willing to use those things against teams that maybe they're not as well suited against because he trusts what we're doing.
Yeah. Does it feel right to you that there are more wrinkles when you play NFC opponents in the regular season?
I have to think about last. I mean, for certain games, for sure. Like 2 years ago when we played the Bucks, and we like went off on Sunday Night Football. It felt like we actually the last two times we've played the Bucks in the regular season, it really felt like we had a lot to offer. I mean, the Lions we played week 1. When we played the Packers, we were okay offensively. We weren't like amazing though, but that was during a stretch where our offense was in a rut. We did look really good against the Bears, and we were pretty good against the Vikings. I don't know. Last year's kind of hard to tell because our offense was like stumbling over itself for most of the year. But in the year before, I'll have to think about who else did we play. This is great audio. I remember us playing the Bucks, but that was our 17th game. I'm trying to remember what division. I think we played the West, maybe. Did we? Yeah, we played the Rams, the Seahawks, the Niners, and the Cardinals. Yeah, we did look good against all four of those teams. Maybe it's true. The Cardinals, we looked really good. The Niners, we looked really good. The Seahawks, our defense did more in that game. We stunk against the Rams, but that was mainly because we couldn't convert in the red zone. We like moved the ball all day. Yeah, maybe there's something to that. I don't know.
I mean, though, I wonder because like looking good against these teams could also be explained by the fact that they just don't play you very much and they haven't developed, they haven't figured out what they need to do against you. They haven't built their roster to defend you. They've built their roster to defend their own division or whatever. Right? So that could also be an explanation.
No, that's true. And I feel like what I'll have to pay attention to more this year as we go through our NFC matchups is seeing how much all 22 I can get my hands on and see if like the plays look any different. That will be interesting to see.
Yeah. Okay. My other Chiefs questions are a little bit more, I don't know. One of them is definitely more personal, and then one is more, I guess, a little bit personal. So I'll go over the medium personal one first, and then we'll go for full personal. What stands out to you as the worst game of Mahomes' career, like his worst performance? And I thought about prepping you to tell you that I was going to ask you this question, but I kind of just want like the gut reaction off the top of your head. Like what's the one? If you look back on it, it's like, oh, that sucks.
Well, I feel like the first thought in my head was the Christmas Day game against the Raiders last year. We just didn't look good at all, and Mahomes threw a really bad pick six that helped like the avalanche of negativity in that game. He also was not particularly good in the loss at Denver last year either. I think for his first couple years, I don't remember him having a really bad game when he wasn't hurt.
Yeah. This is. I thought when I was coming up with this question, I was like, this is a hard one to answer. He never has like, at least that I can remember, like real stinkers. Maybe the Raiders game last year, but he's always on.
Yeah, he is. The one, I think I have an answer. I think it's in 2021 we played at the Titans and we lost 27-3. That was a pretty bad game. And that was back when teams were doing the deep cover 2 shells and we were not quite ready yet as an offense to match like the degree to which teams were dropping back against us. Mahomes definitely, I feel like he missed a lot of opportunities in that game trying to like big game hunt a little bit. So maybe that would be, or, oh man, I don't even want to think about this. The second half of the AFC title game that year, I
Yeah,
wouldn't say that overall was his worst game because he played well, really well in the first half, but the second half was really bad.
yeah. If you could pick a half, I mean that is also coupled with like the massive disappointment of that second half, right? So I
Yeah.
think that's hard to disentangle, um, but it is remarkable how rare his bad games are. They're like if you look at like other like I mean maybe this is just this is totally anecdotal, but you remember Peyton Manning or Tom Brady or Drew Brees or Ben Roethlisberger, like especially Ben Roethlisberger, he's more erratic than most of them, I think. But you know they had bad like significantly bad games, I think, with a much higher frequency than Mahomes has. At least that's the eye test. That's at a cursory glance, that's what it seems like to me. It's like I just never see a stat line from Mahomes, or almost never, where it's like, ooh, he's the reason they lost that one. I feel like he usually is.
No, that's true. It is, and really for the first, I would say 3 years of his career, I feel like most of his bad games, or maybe all of his bad games, you could come up with a reason. Like the Super Bowl against the Bucks, like the offensive line was decimated. He had a
And
bad
he
game
was
against
not
the
bad.
yeah.
Like
I mean, he
right.
played very well.
Some of
His stat
those
line wasn't great, but he
right.
did a lot.
But like anyone who came out thinking he was the reason they lost, I feel like no, that it's wrong. Uh, and that one throw, everyone knows that one throw where he's in midair and throws it for like 30 yards and hits his receiver in the face,
Yeah,
basically. Like, uh,
it
man,
was a
if only
good
that had been caught.
summation of that game. Yeah.
Yeah. Who was the receiver on
It was Daryl Williams. He was a backup running back, but
that? Okay.
it explains a little more why it hit him in the face. But he was actually a very good receiving back. Like he had an awesome catch where he went up against Jonathan Abrams the next year. He basically like mossed a safety against the Raiders. Like Mahomes just like threw up a like moon ball to him and he went up and got it. So he had some ball skills. He just didn't catch that one.
Yeah. A backup running back mossing the safety is not something you expect. Um, so okay, sooner or later, and I'll tell you this now because I'll just so I will prep you for this question, but I'm going to ask you for your top five, his top five like best performances.
Ooh, that's gonna be hard.
But I think that will be um, maybe more fun. I don't know. It's fun to think about bad ones. Maybe less so for you, but there just aren't many. Uh, anyway, okay. Um, okay, so I have one more Chiefs question, and it's most personal. When is the last time that you cried because of a Chiefs game? They could be tears of joy, I guess. I didn't specify anything.
Um, I don't know. I'm.
First, I
feel
guess I
like
could say, have you ever cried because of a Chiefs
I don't think so. I mean, definitely. I haven't like. Well, I'll say for sure. I haven't like sobbed during a Chiefs game or because of a Chiefs. I don't think so, at least, unless I'm forgetting something. I feel like the most. Sometimes I've like welled up. At least I remember once, and that was when we. It was. I think the last time would have been. I think the first time we won the Super Bowl, and it wasn't like during the game. Actually, it was afterwards when I was watching like the replay stuff of like everyone celebrating with Andy Reid when he like won his first Super Bowl. I feel like that's the most emotional I've been, like, just because he's had such a long career and been wanting that Super Bowl win for so long, and everyone was so happy for him, and so I feel like that I definitely like welled up watching that. That was really cool.
game? Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, there must be like a sort of torrent of
Oh, you know
emotions at
what?
that point.
That's actually not true as the last time. The last time was, again, it was after we won the Super Bowl against the Eagles. There was this clip. It was a really nice clip of Mahomes' dad and Mahomes. and they were like, and his dad was just like in awe of him, and he was like, he said something to the effect of like you are different, you're special, you're just different, and I feel like that was a really cool clip. I think that's the last time I like was like welled up about a Chiefs thing. That was really cool.
Yeah, that's good, and it's cool that I feel like not many fans, if they will admit to crying about their favorite team, they're not going to be able to admit to crying up like for positive reasons when you've got like two reasons, which is nice. So do you think you've ever cried for like because of a loss or something like if something bad happened?
I, I I wouldn't be surprised. Like I definitely remember being really mad and after the '97 season when we lost to Denver, but I don't remember crying. I wouldn't be surprised if I did though, like
Yeah.
100%. And the other time I remember like really, I remember we lost in 2005. We ended up missing the playoffs, even though we went 10-6. That was you guys got the sixth seed and then won the Super Bowl.
Mm,
But
yes. Oh yeah, was
we
that the last game? Something happened, right?
well, the
That,
last game we actually won, and you won too. I think you were playing the Lions and we were playing the Bengals, and we beat the Bengals, and we needed you to lose to the Lions, which would have been a really sad way to miss the playoffs. But I do.
I remember
We
that
lost
game
a
not
very
being as easy as it should have been. But
yeah. I remember being kind of tight. Like we blew the doors off the Bengals, if I remember. I just remember Larry Johnson having a huge game running the ball. I think it was we at least won by a couple of scores. It was pretty substantial. Uh, but I think one of the key games we had two pretty key losses. One of the key losses was we were playing at Dallas, and the Cowboys. We stopped them on fourth down that would have clinched the game, but Derek Johnson was called for a defensive holding penalty in the end zone. And I remember I was in my basement and we had like vents on our ceiling and I punched one of the vents and broke it. I remember that was like I was so mad. I don't think I cried though, but
oh,
that's
that's
the other
incredible.
loss I remember being like really mad about.
Yeah. Okay. So that there's another question, an adjacent question here, which is, yeah, like, what are your like most extreme reactions to either plays or games? Like the vent punching is a good one. I remember that brought to mind. I think it was 2009. We were playing the Raiders, and every time we played the Raiders in Oakland, we would somehow lose, and it would like derail our season. And it did it
Oh
this year.
yeah.
I don't remember exactly what happened. I think was that Jamarcus Russell? Was he back in 2009?
Oh, that could
Um,
be.
I think he had like a huge touchdown. Maybe it was I think it was probably like a huge touchdown pass of like 80 yards or something. Just as we had like pulled even or tied it, or I don't really gotten close at least. But I had like a stapler in my hand as I was watching it, and I just like launched it at the door and like blew up. But that was I was very mad at that point. It's like we're gonna lose to the Raiders. God, it's gonna be one of those years.
Wow, I can't. That would be really. 2009 sounds like the year. That sounds like a right year for Jamarcus Russell being drafted. I don't know. He wasn't in the league for very long, but that is believable.
Yeah,
I Man, you had a tough run because didn't Terrell Pryor have a really long touchdown against you all too? A rushing
yeah, I think
touchdown.
so. Maybe I'm thinking of that. I don't know.
But I
I
think
mean,
that was
I've
like a
had
first play from scrimmage kind of touchdown. That was really early in the game, I think.
yeah, I don't think that. But this like Raiders games are always like very tumultuous emotionally for us. So I wouldn't be surprised if I did something for that play too. Actually, I think I kind of remember missing that play. Like I hadn't got to a place where I could watch the game yet, and then I heard it. I was like, oh great, okay, it's a classic Raiders game. So,
I remember particularly being annoyed because we would always lose to the Steelers, and then the Steelers would beat the lose to the Raiders. So it'd be like a double gut punch. It's like, all right, if you're gonna beat us, at least beat the Raiders too.
yeah, so many dumb games against the Raiders. Um, I think I blocked out a lot of the details there. We did have a good one in what 2022. So that was fun. But, any other like extreme reactions? I do like
Well,
the vent punch.
I do the vent punch. I remember. What was funny is during the Super Bowl this past year, um, my first time watching a football game with my daughter, and at this time my daughter is like 6 months old, and my wife was holding her, and Justin Watson dropped a pass, and both my wife and I like yelled at him, and my daughter started crying. And we were like so surprised by it. Like, what happened? We were both just like, "You idiot!" And then my daughter started crying, and I was like, "Oh, maybe I need to dial it back."
Yeah, that's good. I wonder how much my football reactions like scare my dogs. But they're like Mocha gets scared by everything, so I don't think that would be that unusual. But Maple, it's on the floor right here. She's never perturbed, so she's probably fine.
I can't remember though ever what I mean. I'm sure I'll have like a bunch of answers to this next week. As far as like, I remember like being so. Remember when we went to the Chiefs Steelers game, that miserable game.
Yeah.
I remember being so annoyed with it that we were sitting in like the last row of the stadium, and I said if the Chiefs won, I would throw my hat out of the stadium. But we didn't win, so didn't have to worry about that.
Yeah, that was a wonderful game. I still have you sent me the link to it on YouTube. I still have that tab open on my phone. I watched a little bit, but it's like, it's just, it's also miserable to rewatch in some respects. Like, I don't know how, anyway, there's not much to enjoy. I mean, maybe you can now enjoy the miserableness of it somehow, like how miserable we were. I don't know. It was not an objectively fun game for either team.
Yeah, I feel like it's easier. I would hope it would be easier for me to enjoy now that like things are going well. I would hope.
Yeah, and like none of those players are on the team anymore. This somehow, like when they're far enough away, like a bad performance then doesn't mean anything about your team now, essentially. So it doesn't affect their chances, at least epistemically, going forward. So it's whatever. Yeah. Well, that's all my Chiefs questions for today. Is there anything else Chiefs related in the news that I should have mentioned or that you wanted to bring up?
Not particularly. I do think it'll be interesting to kind of follow the discourse about Chiefs extensions this year, because we're going to have a lot of people that we drafted start to come up for extensions. The first being Nick Bolton is in a contract year this year. And so it's an extremely polarizing topic for Chiefs fans. People are really like digging in on either side about whether he should be extended and how much for. And the fact that he's a Mizzou guy has added complications to people's discourse. So I think that'll be interesting to follow. I think, actually, I will save my discussion about it for a predictions podcast, because I have some predictions that I think may not fall in line with what most people are thinking are going to happen with that. But we also have, so along with Nick Bolton, Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith are also in contract years, and they make up what some consider to be the best interior offensive line, so that will be interesting. And then the year after, we have the 2022 class, which is going to be McDuffie, Karlaftis, then the rookie corner, or they're not rookies anymore, they're going to be third-year corners, Jalen Watson and Joshua Williams. They're still rookies in my mind for some reason. So that was a pretty loaded draft class, so we'll have to, and Brian Cook also, so that's going to be the thought for the next year or so, is what are the Chiefs going to do as far as a lot of young important players are going to be coming up for second contracts, and what are they going to do? Yeah,
that'll be interesting. I imagine Creed Humphrey's got to be a high priority, right? I would imagine. Maybe I've just always been jealous because we should have taken him. But
I think it's a fair debate about whether it's Humphrey or Bolton that's the highest priority. I think most public discourse among Chiefs fans would lead you to believe that Bolton is by far the highest priority. The one thing is that we had a center that was nearly as good as Creed Humphrey in Mitch Morse that we just let walk after his rookie deal was up under Andy Reid. So that would be the one. I believe he was drafted in Reid's like first or second year as Chiefs coach, and we let him play out his rookie year, and he walked and he went to Buffalo. So that would be the only thought process is about how much Andy Reid values the center position. But if valued properly, like Creed is probably among everyone on our team besides like Mahomes, Kelsey, and Chris Jones. He's probably the best at his position compared to the rest of the league. So I would think that he could be a pretty high priority. And center among those positions, like linebacker, center, and guard, is the least paid position. So the franchise tag number would be the lowest.
Yeah, good point. Yeah. I just feel like a bad center can really sabotage an offense, right? I mean, we
It's true.
have seen this. No, maybe there's an argument that like the difference between like average and a top tier center isn't that significant for the offense as a whole. I don't know. I mean, I guess that could be a wrinkle here, but it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, it's weird because historically Andy Reid had always prioritized having like excellent tackles and had kind of cut corners in the interior offensive line. But that changed after a Super Bowl loss to the Bucks. We actually really fortified the interior of the line and were wheeling and dealing a little more with our tackles. You know, we did trade for Orlando Brown Jr., had him for a couple years, then let him go. So I guess since then we've like paid a tackle and kind of like tried to make it work with the other tackle spot. Whereas otherwise, historically, Andy Reid, you know, he came in, his first draft pick was Eric Fisher, a left tackle. He quickly got Mitchell Schwartz a couple years later when he came up in free agency, and we just had like solid tackles that were among the best combination of the league, and then we just made do with whoever in the interior. But it's kind of flipped now.
Yeah. Well, just don't get someone as well. Anyway, I won't throw any more shade on the person we know I'm talking about.
Well, if it makes you feel any better that you didn't get Creed, the draft pick we got for Creed Humphrey, we actually got from the Ravens. So it was the Ravens' loss that was our gain.
That's nice. That gives me a little bit of modicum of joy. Okay, well, let's see. We got to take a break soon. You can try to get a Steelers question beforehand, or just when we come back. What do you think?
Maybe we can like straddle the break with a question because a couple of my questions are somewhat related. I wanted to talk a little bit training camp because Chiefs, the quarterbacks and rookies reported today actually, so things are getting started, and it made me think about training camp battles, and I was curious if you felt like what are you looking for, I guess, to start as far as Steelers training camp battles for significant playing time or like a starter role? Are there any things that you're keeping an eye on for like higher level training camp battles?
I think, well, the obvious one is quarterback. It does, from what we've heard, it's a competition, but, we'll see. I guess it'll be very interesting to see the playing time there. I guess I imagine it's going to be, Wilson and then Fields, but I don't know. I'd be very curious to see what happens there and how they divide it up, and especially once we get to the preseason games, who starts in those preseason games and whatnot. That'll be fun. I guess wide receiver is still interesting because we don't really have an obvious second wide receiver, or number two. The reports were that Calvin Austin, the third, has had a really awesome offseason and has looked really good in minicamp, and so I think it'll be interesting to see him and Roman Wilson, I guess the guy we drafted from Michigan. That's right, right? That's his name. Uh, yeah, I said Roman Wilson. I was like, wait, it is Wilson. We just have so many Wilsons on our team now. I get confused. Yeah, no, it'll be interesting to see how because both of them have had kind of good things said about them, but I think you would imagine them competing for the slot receiver position, and I don't know. Curious if either of them is going to, they're going to, if we're going to try to put either of them at wide receiver two or what. Um, the other, the other perpetually tantalizing issue here is that Ayuk has now apparently requested a trade from the 49ers. Steelers. It's still every time I go onto Twitter, it's still up there in the trending items. So I don't know. I mean, it would be very uncharacteristic of us to do like a trade and then sign him to the kind of deal that he wants. But again, it would be exciting. So I guess also depends on if the 49ers don't want to do that. I feel like they could probably franchise tag him or something. I don't actually know if there's limits on when you can franchise tag a player. I forgot that fact.
Well,
I think I do it once with Bill.
He still has this year. He's under contract, and then they could tag him next year.
Yeah. So I guess they have a fair amount of leverage. But if the player doesn't want to play for you, that's something. I don't know. Well, we got to take a break. Do you want to... maybe I'll have more coherent thoughts on the other end of it.
Yeah, we'll pick it up at the other side of the break.
Okay.
And we're back.
Yes, we're back.
We talked about a couple position battles, namely quarterback and wide receiver 2. Any other thoughts about kind of more starting position battles in training camp?
Yeah, I think the inside linebacker position next to Patrick Queen. I think obviously he'll be a starter unless something very bad happens. But it'll be interesting to see who's next to him. I think last year it was Landon Roberts and Cole Holcomb. And I think I said this before. I thought they were both pretty good last year. Cole Holcomb tore his ACL, I believe. So I guess there's some question of whether he'll be ready by the start of the season. But then we also have Peyton Wilson from the draft from NC State, who a lot of people, I mean, he had a terrible injury history, but a lot of people thought he might be a huge steal. So we got him in the 4th round, I think. Yeah. He's super fast and whatnot. So I don't know. I think that we have a surprising amount of, I think, solid options at inside linebacker next to Queen. I'm sort of curious what the pecking order is going to be there. I don't know. I don't have any thoughts on what's going to happen, but I guess I imagine it'd probably be Cole Holcomb if he can start. But you could see it going where he's still recovering or not able to be playing yet, and so it's either Roberts or Wilson that gets more playing time to start the year, and then maybe Holcomb gets in there later. But I don't know. I mean, I feel like it's unusual to feel like you have that many four capable starters for I guess 2 positions, but I think we do.
Man, I feel like it's a testament to how different things have been in Pittsburgh recently as far as like national TV games and playoff runs that I don't think I could have named either of the inside linebackers. And I feel like that is rare. Like I'm used to like James Ferrier, Lawrence Timmons, like I know these guys. And you're like Landon Roberts and Cole Holcomb. I was like, who?
Yeah.
That is a real difference.
These are not named it's Landon Roberts. Unless I'm wrong. I mean, I could see myself being like here too, like this, like the kind of like these are not household names, right? And that we're so used to having household names at the.
I even know Robert Spillane. Like
that's not one. I wouldn't call him a household name, but I'm If like that shows you where we are right now. Like him, but not Holcomb or Roberts. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but I
that's
guess you're right. It's also just a matter of like, we haven't been in a lot of nationally televised games or been making prominent playoff runs or anything like that. So that can hurt, knowledge of public knowledge of the team's major players. That's the
yeah.
other one. I'll be curious to see what happens.
And I won't ask you to make more detailed predictions. We can save that for the predictions podcast about, and then we'll have a little bit of camp to see like where you think things are going. But then on the other side, I wanted to talk probably about more players that I will have never heard of. But what about toward the end of the roster? Like, are there any players that you're interested about seeing how their camp goes to see if they'll actually make the team?
Um, so I'll be honest. Like the end of the roster, I don't feel like I know a ton about it. Um, we'll see. Like I usually my approach usually at this stage of the off season is like I'm sure there are players like down the roster who will rise in training camp or whatever, and then other people will notice it, and then I'll notice it through them. That's usually what happens. I do think like I'm still holding out hope. I don't know if you would put him in this category, but Corey Trice, the cornerback we drafted late last year in the draft and hurt. He got injured. I think it was in the preseason last year or training camp or whatever it was. I'm still hopeful that he's going to turn out to be um, a steal. And I think he could be. I guess it depends on how the rehab has gone. But um, you could imagine it not having gone well, and then he doesn't make the team. But I think there was a lot of promise there, so he might fall into this category. Although I'm cheating a bit because I think I've mentioned it before on here. No one's coming to mind right now as like someone I have my eye on that like we should be. I'm not sophisticated enough in my like knowledge of the roster to know which people we should have our eyes on right now.
Are there any people from like the line last year, since you drafted so many offensive linemen this year? Are there some people who maybe even started last year that you're wondering whether will make the team? I mean, the center who will not be mentioned is already gone, but
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess. I mean, I think we see how the line will shape up. I can't imagine there being many surprises there. But I mean, I guess the yeah. I mean, I don't. Not that I would say at this point, but again, like there could be. I mean, that's part of why training camp is interesting because things can go very differently than you were expecting. And I think, I mean, like there's, yeah, yeah, we'll see. But I think,
or
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, or on the other hand, training camp can go the way you were expecting, and then the regular season is not at all a reflection of training camp.
Yeah,
Because toward the end of training camp, it's crazy to think, but the consensus among Chiefs fans was this was the deepest wide receiver core that we've ever had. And wow, was that wrong? So,
yeah, that doesn't seem right. That, I mean, likewise with last year with us. I mean, it was like, oh, the offense has figured it out. Pickett's Pickett's it, right? I mean, I was even thinking this last year after despite my better judgment, uh, after the preseason and watching our offense be as good as it was, I'm super excited. And then we promptly went back to being terrible. So, yeah, I think I don't know how much like this is a general question, but like how much do you lean into the storylines of training camp versus just sort of pump the brakes on what everyone's talking about?
so I don't lean in whatsoever until the like around the time of the second preseason game, because like everyone's in pads. Because I feel like the early problem in training camp is You can't evaluate any offensive lineman when they're not in pads. Nothing with the run game. And there are a lot of receivers, and we've run into this problem with guys like I would put Hardman, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Sky Moore, all into this category of people that look awesome in shorts and t-shirts because they're really athletic, but cannot play through contact at all. So once the pads come on, like they're completely different receivers. And so everyone gets like so hyped. Everyone was so pumped about Sky Moore's camp last year. And then it just didn't translate to the field. And so I feel like I pay a little bit of attention once you get to like around that second preseason game, because then who's running with the ones kind of matters. The Chiefs tend to cycle a lot of people in with the first team early on, especially on defense. So I just like it's hard to put any stock. But then once you're on the second preseason game, I feel like I start paying attention around that time. And then by the third preseason game, it's just about the bottom of the roster. So you're looking at more who's going to make the team rather than who's going to actually start.
Yeah. Yeah. Although, yeah, I guess that's right. They've changed. I think the approaches have changed a bit since they eliminated the fourth preseason game. That was like always like, can you make the team at this point? Whereas I'm pretty sure last year our starters played a couple series, or maybe it was just one series in the third preseason game, but didn't help.
Well, and that's the other thing is like with this change, different teams have started doing things differently. I think Andy Reid is a lot more like the traditional model as much as possible, but some coaches don't even play people in the preseason anymore, and then it becomes really hard to tell what anything means.
Yeah. Do we know? Are we expecting Aaron Rodgers to play in the preseason at this point? Like maybe it's too early to tell.
Shocked.
Yeah, I wouldn't be as like I could see him having like oh, I want to prove that I'm back or whatever. I could see him like requesting just to play a bit, but I could also see him not wanting to play at all this entire season. Right? Like I just like he's a little bit of a wild card.
Yeah. All right, so my last Steelers question, and I thought about this because I happened upon highlights of a certain Steeler. So, and it made me think about how underrated I felt like the Steeler was. So then I wanted to ask you, during your lifetime, off the top of your head, who would you think is the Steeler who, like nationally, whose efforts were the most underappreciated compared to how useful they actually were as a player?
That's a really cool question. Geez. I'm gonna take a minute on this, but um, I feel. I mean, good. I like these. Very pregnant pauses during a podcast. We need like Jeopardy music or something in here.
Yeah.
But I mean, I do feel like Casey Hampton. I mean, maybe he was fairly recognized, but like as soon as he left, we had trouble on the defensive line. Like he was good, and I didn't appreciate how good he was until he wasn't there.
See, I feel like here I'll stall a little. I'll fill in a little bit. Just about Casey Hampton, I do feel like I thought he was amazing because this was a time when the Chiefs' defensive line was so bad. But like it was so interesting to watch a player who seemed like he was just moving mountains in there. And I remember always thinking like, wouldn't it be nice if we had a defensive lineman as impactful as Casey Hampton? I remember even being excited when we got Dontari Poe, which would have been, I want to say like 2014, and thinking like maybe he could be our Casey Hampton. Like I just want someone that can really do a bunch on the inside of the defensive line.
Did he ever intercept Ben Roethlisberger? For some reason, I have this. Maybe he caught touchdown pass, but there's some defensive lineman on the Chiefs that
threw a touchdown pass. Actually, he caught one too. But he threw one. I was at the game when he threw one. It was great against Denver, 2016 Christmas Day. Sonia and I were at that game.
Well, that's Yeah, throwing a touchdown passes as a lineman, that must be a career highlight. But yeah, I think, I mean, it's hard for, I guess part of what makes the question hard for me is like in the, like distinguishing whether the, like local media or the people I follow on Twitter recognize this person versus whether national media do. Like, again, I don't think I pay enough attention to the national media in recent years to know like who's regarded as a really good player on the Steelers in that um, forum. But I mean, there's so many players that like. Here's a really really weird one. And there's a lot of receivers that we had that like it's hard to know if they were actually good or if Ben just made them look good. Um, but Marcus Wheaton, there was a year there, I think 2015, where I really like was I thought he was going to be something special. He I think it was 2015 where he had some of his best games. I mean, but it's weird because I think he had like a 200-yard game against the Seahawks that year.
Oh wow.
Um, and I don't know if he ever had like another 100-yard game. Like he had a couple of good games, like where he got like he did, made touchdown catches. Him and maybe Eli Rogers is another player, another receiver like this. And again, like it's a case where like I don't know how much of them looking good and making clutch plays is attributable to them versus to Ben. Just I do think he made a lot of receivers look good, um, but both of them are names that I remember very fondly, and I don't think they are names that got much attention.
I would venture to guess. I feel like a lot of non like intense football fans wouldn't even remember who Eli Rogers is, or maybe not even Marcus Wheaton. I feel like Marcus Wheaton has a little more distinctive a name, so maybe that sticks with people.
Yeah.
That's funny because the person I was thinking of that prompted this question was a slightly more recognized receiver. I was thinking of Mike Wallace. Like I feel like Mike Wallace was like a really good player for at least 2 years, and one would argue even like all 4 years he was in Pittsburgh, he was impactful.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I think that sometimes the people that are fast get kind of downplayed as deep threats, but the reason why he came to mind was I was thinking that maybe Hollywood Brown would be like a Mike Wallace on our team, someone who the primary threat is deep. I don't know if Hollywood Brown will be as good of a deep threat as Mike Wallace was, but Mike Wallace could also play on the intermediate game. He could catch drag routes. He would, still run comebacks and stuff. And I think that's what I'm thinking of Hollywood Brown as a guy who scares defenses because of the deep threat, but can run the whole route tree. And so that's why Wallace
Mm.
came to mind to me.
Yeah, I do. I feel like Hollywood Brown. Maybe my conception of him is wrong, but I imagine him like I think Wallace really like he could do other routes, but he was best when like his straight line speed was what distinguished him. I think like I do remember him breaking a couple like wide receiver screens, but again, like he usually like the when you got excited when he had the ball was when he was running in a straight line. Like he wasn't making people miss much. He wasn't like running complicated routes in the middle of the field at that much. I mean, he had some really clutch plays for us. And I think the reason I didn't pick him was because I guess maybe this is one of the cases where I thought in the national media. Sorry, Maple is squeaking a toy right now. um, I thought of him as one that was sort of more recognized as like he's a definite at least a deep threat, right? I mean, I remember one play against I think it was on a Sunday Night Football maybe against the Lions. Or, I don't maybe not the Lions, but it was really cool because they caught like pre-snap they caught like Ben nodding to Wallace like we got the coverage we wanted. Like he just nods to him and then he takes a deep shot and we got like a a 60 or 70 yard touchdown on the play or something. So it, I remember, yeah, that kind of thing. That they knew to look for that. I guess that indicated to me that he was more of a well-known player nationally. But I do think, yeah. And then he went to the Ravens, and so that was fun in its own right. But yeah, he's another one where I guess I wonder how much of his career was made by Ben.
I think didn't he have like a decent year with the Ravens, and I think he had like one good year with the Dolphins too.
Oh
Did,
yeah,
I
yeah,
think,
that's
but
believable.
yeah, I don't think he was ever. I mean, the consistently good because I think even his rookie year, like he was good in Pittsburgh, right? He was never like not productive.
Yeah, he
Um,
was. Yeah, we were thinking of him as like the next big Steelers receiver after Hines Ward at one point. And he had like some of those, like he caught the that touchdown against the Packers when like the last second touchdown that put Ben over 500 for that game. We
it
won
was
by
like
like a point.
actually double zeros on the clock, right? Like the
Yeah,
last,
yeah.
like
And it was fourth down too. I think it was and it was like from the 20, like not somehow he got single coverage and then
and
made a
Ben
nice
threw it
catch on the
like
pylon.
I think it was like horizontally, like three-quarters of the way across the field. Like Ben threw it from
Yeah,
like the opposite hash, or maybe even definitely around the opposite hash. That was a crazy throw.
yeah, that was one of those ones where like I only appreciate that now in hindsight, having had several years of quarterbacks that don't make throws like that, basically. Um, but yeah, that was a fun one. And then he had a cool touchdown catch in the Super Bowl against the Packers as well. I guess he had some good kid plays against the Packers. Um, yeah, Maple, I'm not playing right now. Sorry. um, uh, yeah, but Wallace is a good pick. I would say.
Yeah, and I think that's noted as far as I feel like Hollywood Brown isn't going to be the deep threat that Wallace was, and will be more of an intermediate threat, I think, than Wallace was. Maybe the better comparison is like Mike Wallace is McCole Hardman if McCole Hardman was a lot better at the things he's good at. like, like if he could more consistently do what he's good. The thing though is that Wallace could track the ball down the field, and McCole Hardman, unfortunately, that's not something he's great at.
Yeah, I don't know how you learned that, but that seems fairly crucial as a deep
Yeah.
threat. All right. Well, do you want to move to some general NFL questions, or
Yeah.
or is this when do we have the Chris questions it segment? I forget.
Yeah, that's a good question. Maybe let's do it now. Yeah, let's do it before general NFL questions.
Okay, I'll question when we have it.
Okay, so this is our segment, Chris Questions It, where Chris, the philosophy professor, he's not been prepared with this. We give him a statement that we feel like most of the public finds to be true. I don't know why I keep saying we, as if it's not like me personally. I am finding a statement that I think that most people think is true, and I will present it to Chris to see if he's able to question it. So here is the question. Some of these are going to get real grim, by the way. I've thought of several, and some of them are real grim. We won't go that grim today. Well, I guess some people might consider this grim, but I feel like in general, we as a human race, whether you believe in global warming or not, or whether you think a bunch of things need to be done immediately to the environment, I think we as a human race all accept the idea that it is important to extend the survival of the human race as long as we can. So I pose that to you, the statement being, it is important that we extend the survival of the human race as long as possible. We work to make sure that the human race continues to exist. Can you question that statement?
Yeah, I guess so. So, do you know about this, like the long-termism movement? And it's
Oh, I don't think
it's
so.
probably just in philosophy. But so there's like the effective altruist movement, which is like basically you should maximize your charity, philanthropy, helping of other people, and you know, the sort of classic argument that moves you in this direction is uh, due to I think Peter Singer, who's imagining like suppose there's like a drowning child on your way to work, and you have the opportunity to save them, but you have to like you don't have time to take off your really nice expensive suit or your laptop case, and so you're going to lose $3,000 and to do it. The thought is you should still do it, and then the thought is okay, but just imagine that this child is on the other side of the world and you're not losing suit. But the question is, should you donate $3,000 to save this child's life? And the thought is like, why would distance be a crucial factor? And so like the thinking here, this doesn't sound at all related to your question, but I'm going to get there. The thinking here is like we got to maximize the sort of the altruistic impulse and do it in a way that's sort of maximizing the expected utility of it. And then, so that's like a segment of, I guess, some ethicists, you might call them. And then there's a subsegment of them who started calling themselves long-termists, and basically they were emphasizing that we need to like do everything we can to maximize the chances of the survival of the human race. Because if you think about it, right, like if the human race dies in the next 50 or goes extinct in the next 50 or 100 or whatever years, then you're cutting off like thousands and thousands of potential people that could experience happiness and lives of some sort of utility. And so you should devote basically tons of resources to ensuring its survival, at the cost of very immediate things, right? At the cost of even the drowning child or whatever, right? No, devote like all your resources to perpetuating the human race, because the amount of utility you would gain, this is a very utilitarian way of thinking, but the amount of utility you would gain or lose rather if the human race went extinct is far greater than the amount of utility you would lose if one person died today. So I think so they're thinking like, yes, you have to devote like as much as possible of your resources to perpetuating the survival of the human race. And I think a lot of people are not convinced, just because of how counterintuitive a lot of the results are, right? Like, no, don't even donate your time to charity, right? But do everything you can like donate all your money to, I don't know, like cancer research or whatever, or looking at interstellar bodies that might collide with the Earth and make sure that we have a good map of that. Like, I don't know. I mean, you get to these very counterintuitive results, and at some point you think something has gone wrong here. So that's a way of sort of questioning the idea that you should devote a lot of resources to the survival of the human race. I think your question was a bit harder to question, I guess, or your prompt was a bit harder to question, namely, do you think we should devote, I mean, I guess one way of putting it is, should we devote any resources to assuring the survival of the human race?
Yeah, like, is it important? Is it important at all that the human race survives?
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, one can take the cosmic perspective, right? That like all of this is insignificant. Or like on a speck of dust, essentially, and on a larger speck of dust amongst many specks of dust in the galaxy, in the universe. So I guess from that cosmic perspective, that no, like nothing we do matters, including whether we try to, like, whether the human race lives on or not. That would be one perspective from which I guess you could question it. That's a very like existentialist worry, I guess, and not one that I personally find compelling. I guess all flavors of sort of nihilism would be helpful here, right? If you just think that no, really, nothing matters, or there are no real moral truths or anything like that, then no, it would be false that we should do this, because we shouldn't do anything, right? We should, or we can do whatever we want. So from those kinds of perspectives, those extreme perspectives, I guess um, one could question whether the survival of the human race is important.
Wait, is this a coherent thought? I was thinking about it. What if you were an advocate solely for the quality of the planet Earth? Then could you argue that humans are actually detrimental to the planet Earth? And so if your goal was making Earth as great of a planet as possible, then maybe removing humans would be a good thing for Earth.
Yeah, I think so. Although you have to like, what is it? What is it? I think it'd be hard to disentangle like what is it for Earth to be well off versus not well off in a way that is not affected by valuing the survival of humans, right?
What
It's such
about
that
the
like,
survival of other species? Because haven't we like
yeah,
caused the extinction of so many other species?
yeah, that could do it, right? Like it's the like if we're causing mass extinction events, I guess, then you might think that all things considered, we really ought not be here. Um, which in my more pessimistic moments, I sometimes think. Uh, yeah. So that's a fairly compelling one. I like that. That's good.
Well, and I wanted to think too about one of the things that you mentioned with what you say it was long termists.
Yeah.
It's isn't like I mean, and I'm sure this is probably what people use when they argue against it, kind of what, but it feels like the more you kind of push into this idea of the future, the more you're making the present worse. And so then couldn't you theoretically hit a breaking point where you're talking about all this utility you're creating about life on Earth, but if life on Earth sucks that bad that you're actually not like creating more human life isn't maybe you're having people born into a terrible thing that would be better for them not to be born into.
Yeah. I mean, I'll like my, yeah. So I feel like you have to have a sort of, in my opinion, very crude conception of value here. And it's got to like some of the classic criticisms of utilitarianism are like, well, just imagine one earthworm that lives for like 18 trillion years or something like that, but has like a modicum of happiness for each instant in that trillion years. And it sum all the happiness, and it turns out that one earthworm living for that long would be greater than any existence of any amount of humans at whatever level of happiness, as long as it doesn't add up to as much as the earthworm. And that just like to think that that's all that matters, that like how much subjective pleasure you have is all that matters, and it's just the sum of that, and that's it. I mean, I can't. It just feels like a totally bankrupt conception of morality to me. But a lot of people, at least a lot of utilitarian, some versions of utilitarianism do seem to be on board with that. Um, uh, that's not all that matters, right? Like, definitely not.
It would seem that would be an interesting thought. I would have to grapple with that a little bit. I don't know.
It can't be right. It can't be right. That's not what. Plenty of things matter. Not just subjective pleasure. It's. I don't have an argument for it. It's just right.
All right. Well, that
Um,
was Chris questions it. This, segment number 2. I don't know. We really need some music for this. I gotta go look for. Like, we gotta spruce this up a little bit.
we
It'll
should
be
make
fun.
it like yeah. We should make it like something that like sounds kind of doofusy or something like that, right? 'Cause, like, well, I think that would be a good
Yeah.
lead into like prepare yourself for this. This is gonna get kind of doofusy.
All right. Do we? I know we're running short on time and we're coming up on a break. Do we might not have time on the other side of the break? Will we?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna be. I gotta run a bit earlier today. So we should decide maybe now whether we want to do general NFL or anecdotes, or maybe try to fit in quick ones of both. What do
Yeah.
you?
I feel like maybe we could do anecdotes and then wrap up.
Okay. Um, yeah. I gotta run today. But do you want to go first? I think I went first last time.
All right. I do have a quick one because it's not really much of an anecdote. It's more of just uh, And well, I guess it's an anecdote a little bit. So you had mentioned your like memory of Toga Day, how we had like when we were in school at CIS, we would have a day every year where we would dress up in togas and walk downtown and eat at Harpo's, a local bar and grill. And I think the part that we didn't talk about was we would actually like then put on like a show for the school where we would be in like every class would have a play that would be somehow Roman or Latin themed. And like the entire school would sit in this auditorium and like every class would put on a play. And I just have a memory. I wish I remembered what year this was. I want to say it was when we were in 8th or ninth grade. I want to say ninth grade. I just remember that you had a line because there was some character named Mary Anibus. And I remember you had a line that was "Happy belated birthday, Mary Anibus," and it felt like so out of it just felt random. And I remember how much you hated that line, and you like, and I don't know why that memory sticks with me, but it was left in the skit, and you delivered it on stage. But I just remember your disdain for that line, and it just makes me laugh thinking about it.
Oh yeah, I don't know how you remember that. That is like a that is really far back in my memory. But happy belated birthday, Mary. Yeah, I feel like I hated basically every word in that, and then to string them together like that, I just hated you. I don't know exactly why I hated it so much, but it still like makes me a little uncomfortable to think about it. Oh, like happy belated birthday. And I was supposed to say it with enthusiasm, right? It was not supposed to. Yeah, it's hard for me to say even now, like just not the performance. That's I don't know. Like, is it objectively
Well, I think
cringeworthy? Because
part of
it
it
made
was
me cringe.
how I feel like part of it was how it fit in the play. Like it just felt like it was just thrown in, and like there were a lot of us, and we all had to have a line, and so it was just like they had to put a line in for everybody, and I feel like it just didn't make any sense in the conversation.
Yeah. Uh, it would have been funny if I don't. I like have so little memory of these plays in the first place. But like whoever wrote that, if they were thinking like we should make Chris say that, that's like that was a good choice. That that probably caused some psychological damage. um, okay, well, my anecdote is. Wait, do you remember your line from that before I get to mine?
No, I don't. I just remember that's the only thing I remember about that year's play. That's it.
Well, I'm glad that at least that that has stuck with you. Yeah. If I ever get a tattoo, maybe I'll get that tattoo. Um, so my anecdote was when I asked you about the worst game of Mahomes' career. I was sort of prepping for this because I think arguably, I mean, there's a good number to choose from in there, but maybe the worst game of Ben Roethlisberger's career was when we played the Jaguars in 2017, and he threw 5 interceptions and no touchdowns. And like some of those interceptions were not entirely his fault, but it was a terrible game. And what's fun about this, from my perspective, is that uh, my partner surprised me with tickets to the game, and I didn't even know I was going to the game like 2 days beforehand. And so like I was like super thrilled to be at the stadium and be here for this. And then we lost 30-9. There was nothing fun about that game at all. We got to see maybe the worst, arguably, at least by the numbers, the worst game of Ben's career in person. It was, of course, I would be there in person. um,
that is rough.
Yeah, it was not a great one. And then we lost to the Jaguars again in the playoffs that year. Um, we went 13-3 that year, and that was by far the worst loss. I mean, a lot of our wins they were by narrow margins, so it's not like we were actually blowing teams out. But we were a good team that year, and I got to see definitely our worst performance. So, great.
Well, Ben played better in the playoff game at least, even if the
That's
defense
true.
didn't.
mean, he did throw, I think, a pick six at the start, or maybe he had some sort of turnover causing a touchdown at the start, but he did throw 5 touchdowns as well. So, yeah, he was not the reason we lost.
All right. Well, I guess we will reconvene next week, and more, I guess, training camp stuff to talk about, and maybe not division preview next time, but the time after.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay. Well,
All right.
thanks for listening, and sorry I got to run early today, but we'll be back next week.
All right. Until next time.